The Vanishing Canvas, How a Silent Exit Paints an Unforgettable Legacy by Stoiccat. Continued. The city lights flickered like scattered embers against the night sky as I sat on my fire escape, the letter from Aurelius still tucked into my sketchbook. 3 years had passed since I'd walked away, and the weight of that choice had settled into me. Not as regret, but as a quiet certainty. I'd left with my dignity intact, and that had been my shield. But shields don't stop the arrows from coming. They just keep them from piercing too deep. After I'd gone, I heard whispers through the grapevine. Friends we'd shared, acquaintances who loved a good story. They said Aurelius had waited for me to crack first. He'd expected me to call, to send some rambling letter begging for closure, to show up on his doorstep with tear-streaked cheeks and a plea for him to care again. They all did. People love a collapse. It's theater to them. A chance to see someone unravel, to prove they still hold power over you. But I didn't give them the show they wanted. I stayed silent, and that silence became my weapon. They don't tell you how hard it is to hold your tongue when everything inside you wants to scream. The first few weeks after I left, my phone sat heavy in my pocket, daring me to type out the words I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times. Why didn't you fight for me? Don't you miss me? Don't you feel anything? Each time, my fingers hovered over the screen, trembling with the urge to let it all spill out. But I didn't. I'd slam the phone down, grab my sketchbook, and pour the chaos onto the page instead. Jagged lines, stormy seas, faces I didn't recognize. Anything to keep from handing him the reins to my heart again. They were waiting for me to fall apart, to prove I was still tethered to him. Aurelius, with his quiet pride, probably thought I'd break first. You know, I'd learned long ago that reacting gives them what they want. Confirmation that they still matter, that they can still pull your strings. I'd seen it with my mother, the way her suitors would linger after she'd shown them the door, waiting for her to falter. She never did. She'd just light a cigarette, lean against the frame, and say, "You'll be fine without me." And they weren't, but she was. So I didn't call. I didn't write. I let the silence stretch between us like a taut wire, vibrating with everything unsaid. People think silence is surrender. It's not. It's strategy. It's the refusal to let someone else dictate your worth. Every day I didn't reach out. I took back a piece of myself. And every day I didn't hear from him. I knew he was feeling the weight of my absence, even if he never admitted. Closure's a myth they sell you to keep you chasing shadows. I figured that out fast. In those early months, I'd catch myself staring at the horizon, wondering if Aurelius would ever explain why he'd let us drift apart. I wanted answers, clean, neat ones that would tie up the loose ends and let me sleep without dreaming of him. But life doesn't work that way. People leave, and they don't come with instruction manuals for apologies. The only closure you get is the one you build yourself, brick by brick, out of the wreckage they leave behind. I stopped looking for it, not because I didn't care, but because I realized chasing it would keep me stuck. I'd spent too many nights pacing my apartment, replaying our last months together, his late nights at the garage, my restless walks along the cliffs, trying to pinpoint where it went wrong. It was like chasing smoke. The harder I grasped, the more it slipped away. Freedom came when I decided he didn't owe me anything. Not an explanation, not a goodbye. I owed it to myself to move on, and that meant letting the questions die unanswered. Silence became my refuge. I didn't need to shout my pain into the void or beg him for validation. I turned inward, sketching until my hands ached, filling pages with the storms I wouldn't let spill out in words. Each stroke was a choice, to heal, to grow, to reclaim the power I'd almost given away. When you don't react, you keep the reins. You force them to sit with the emptiness you've left, to wonder why you didn't break. Aurelius wasn't the only one watching for cracks. The mutual friends, the ones who'd nod sympathetically over coffee, while fishing for gossip, they wanted the drama too. Have you talked to him? They'd ask, eyes glinting with curiosity. Don't you miss him? I'd smile, sip my drink, and say, I'm good. They'd blink, waiting for more, but I'd give them nothing. That drove them wild. People hate a mystery they can't solve, and I'd become one. Not because I was trying to, but because I refused to play their game. Silence isn't apathy, it's control. When you don't lash out, when you don't feed their hunger for your pain, You become untouchable. I saw it in their faces, the way they'd shift, uncomfortable when I didn't crumble. They wanted me to be the heartbroken girl, the one who'd spilled her guts, and prove Aurelius still had me in his grip. But I wasn't her. I'd walked away, and I kept walking, head high, heart bruised but unbroken. That's what they couldn't stand, that I didn't need their pity or his approval to keep going. It's funny how absence can scream louder than words. I didn't have to tell Elias I was done. My silence did that for me. I didn't have to beg for him to see my worth. My leaving, my refusal to chase him, said it all. And I knew it gnawed at him, even if he'd never show it. People don't forget the ones who don't beg. The ones who vanish with a quiet strength that leaves you questioning what you let slip away. Healing isn't a conversation. It's a decision. I learned that the hard way, piecing myself back together in that cramped city apartment. I didn't need Elias to tell me I was enough. I didn't need anyone to. The first year, I'd wake up some mornings with a hollow ache in my chest, his laugh echoing in my head like a song I couldn't shake. I'd sit there, staring at the ceiling, tempted to call just to hear his voice. But I'd get up instead, brew coffee, and sketch until the ache dulled. Day by day, I chose myself over the past, and that choice became my backbone. Pain's a brutal teacher, but it's a good one if you let it be. I could have let it drown me. Plenty of people do, sinking into memories they can't escape. But I didn't. I took it, held it, turned it over in my hands until I saw it for what it was, fuel. Every pang of loss, every unanswered question, I funneled into something stronger. My sketches got sharper, my lines bolder. The gallery started selling my work, not just framing it. And I built a life that didn't hinge on him or anyone else. Growth doesn't come from comfort. It's forged in the fire of what you survive. They wanted me trapped, I think, Elias, the friends, maybe even me, and my weakest. They expected me to stay the girl who'd sit on the pier with him, sketching while he smoked, and the world felt small and safe. But I didn't. I used the hurt to push forward, to claw my way into something bigger. Reinvention isn't instant. It's slow, messy, 1,000 tiny choices to keep going when you'd rather curl up and quit. Each step was a break in the wall between who I'd been and who I was becoming. Transformation crept in like dawn, subtle at first, then blinding. I stopped seeing Elias as the center of my story. He was a chapter, not the book. The pain he'd left didn't define me. It refined me. I'd walk the city streets, sketchbook under my arm, and feel a quiet pride in the woman I'd built from the ashes. I didn't need his validation or anyone's. My value wasn't tied to who missed me or who didn't. It was mine, hard-earned and unshakable. Detaching didn't mean I stopped feeling. I'd still catch his scent in the salt air some days, or hear his voice in the rumble of a passing truck, but I didn't let it pull me under. I'd nod to it, like an old friend passing by, and keep walking. That's the trick, letting the emotions come without letting them stay. It freed me, gave me back the energy I'd wasted on wondering. And the strangest thing happened, people started noticing. Not just my art, but me. The way I carried myself. Calm and sure, drew eyes in a way I hadn't expected. Strength is magnetic. It doesn't shout, it hums. When you stop leaning on others to prop you up, you stand taller. I didn't need Elias to tell me I was worth something. I didn't need the friends' pity or the world applause. I found in the quiet moments, framing a sketch, sipping coffee alone, watching the city pulse below my window. My life became mine again, not a shadow of what we'd been. And that's when I knew, value isn't what others give you. It's what you claim for yourself. Absence is a language all its own. I've been gone from Elias's life for years now. A ghost he couldn't pin down. That letter about his shop was the first crack in his armor, but I didn't rush to fill the gap. I let it hang there, unanswered, because my presence wasn't a gift I'd hand out freely anymore. When you're always around, people take you for granted. Step away, and they feel the draft where you used to be. I didn't need to see him to know he felt it. The shop's name, Driftwood Repairs, was proof enough. He'd named it after me, after us, whether he'd admit it or not. My absence wasn't just a loss. It was a mirror, showing him what he'd let go. People don't miss the constant. They miss the rare, the fleeting, the things they can't hold on to. I made myself scarce, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, and that scarcity sharpened my edges in his memory. It's not about being cruel. It's about knowing your worth. When you stop showing up, when you stop begging for a seat at the table, they start to see the empty chair. Elias could have called again, could have written more, but he didn't. Maybe he was too proud, or maybe he knew I wouldn't bend. Either way, my silence spoke louder than any plea. It said, I don't need you to see me. I see myself. Pain's a raw material if you're brave enough to shape it. I carried mine like a stone in my chest for too long, letting it weigh me down. Then I started carving. Every sketch, every step forward, chipped away at it until it wasn't a burden anymore. It was a blade, honed and mine to wield. The hurt Elias laughed didn't break me. It built me. I'd faced it, stared it down, and turned it into something I could use. Obstacles aren't endings. They're clay. The nights I'd want to call him. The mornings I'd woken up hollow. They weren't defeats. They were lessons, each one teaching me how to stand firmer, how to need less from the world and more from myself. Pain's a teacher with a heavy hand, but it's fair. It gives you what you put in. I put in everything, and I came out stronger. Recovery's not a straight line. Some days, I'd sketch his face without meaning to, the lines of his jaw slipping onto the page like a reflex. I'd stare at it, then tear it out and start over. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't need him haunting me anymore. The past isn't a chain unless you let it be. I chose to forge it into something else. Pride, maybe, or proof that I could fall and rise again. They'd waited for me to stumble, to prove I couldn't survive without him. I didn't. I thrived. My silence wasn't weakness. It was armor. My pain wasn't a grave. It was a forge. And my absence, that was my signature, scrawled across the lives I'd touched and left behind. Elias would carry me in the hum of his shop, in the driftwood he'd named it for. The friends would whisper my name, still wondering how I'd walked away so steady. And I'd keep going, sketching my way through a world that couldn't cage me. Leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The canvas might have vanished, but the picture I'd painted, quiet, fierce, unyielding, would linger long after I was gone.